Chapter 2. Workshop. Ouch! Kevin exclaimed after feeling the sharp edge of a blade slice his skin. Hesitantly, he pulled his hand back from the sharpener the knife was clamped into to inspect the degree of this cut. For Kevin, this was only one of many cuts suffered due to being a blade-smith. He knew wearing safety gear such as gloves would lower, if not eliminate, the number of cuts he received, but would also limit his sensitivity. The feel of stone sharpening steel was soothing, for it meant that another knife project was near completion. At the moment, this one would have to wait as he inspected damage done to his finger. Blood flowed from the perfectly straight red line. "Yeah, I would say this one is near razor sharp," Kevin said aloud. Calmly, he pinched the cut closed with his other hand and held it for a few seconds, which normally allowed the two sides to adhere to each other, creating a very short healing time. This cut, however, was slightly deeper. "Well, looks like time for superglue," Kevin thought, turning to open the drawer of his toolbox marked Boo Boo. The worn label had been placed there by his wife, Mary, who was a registered nurse at their local hospital, gave him a chuckle each time he reached for it. This time, as he slid the Boo Boo drawer open to retrieve the superglue, he remembered his wife was not at work, and a slight smile appeared on his face. Closing the drawer, he made his way into the house holding his finger like a little wounded boy at the age of 36. After all, the walk from his workshop to the house was very short. "Mary, Mary," Kevin softly called for his wife. Looking around and not seeing her in the living room or kitchen, he knew just where she would be. Mary was a very goal-orientated person and wanted to achieve the highest education she could in nursing. Currently, she was working on her doctorate, so he knew just where to find her. Walking into her office, holding his wound together with soft pressure, Kevin stood just inside the doorway. "What did you do?" Mary asked sarcastically, having dealt with this scenario a number of times before. Nothing. You weren't wearing the gloves I bought you, were you?" Mary cut him off. "No," Kevin said, while pretending to hang his head in shame. "Get over here then, let's have a look," Mary ordered. Kevin loved the banter with his wife. They often had loud, playful fights about nothing, and some just screaming who loved the other more. Chuckles were often had at the thought of someone hearing them, for they would most likely believe they were fighting. This time, for Kevin, it was about attention-seeking and using this opportunity to have his wife take care of him. "This is going to need stitches," Mary said after a cursory inspection, ever so softly shaking his head due to predicting just what she would say, due to having heard her say it on many other occasions. Kevin replied, "It'll be okay. You know I am not doing that." "Well, I am going to at least put steri strips on to hold it together. You're not going to be able to use it for a while as it heals. Otherwise, it will just break open," Mary informed him while leading him to the bathroom like a child. Knowing just how things were going to play out didn't change how much Kevin enjoyed the experience. He also knew he would be back out in his shop working with superglue, holding the cut together. Remaining still while Mary attended to his cut, Kevin marveled at how, after 12 years together, he loved her more each day. "You know, it is late in the day, and I am at a great stopping point. You want to go get something to eat?" Mary asked. "Where at?" Kevin replied with a little smirk. "Chinese?" Mary replied, knowing it was difficult for him to turn down. After eating until they both felt like stuffed pufferfish, it was off to get groceries and other items needed while they were in town. First stop was always for non-perishable items at their local hardware store to pick up supplies for home and workshop. Next was the clothing store. For Mary to shop for things she required. Finally, the grocery store. At each stop, Kevin exited the vehicle and walked to Mary's side, taking her hand firmly in his so they could walk together. They returned home as the day drew to an end. After putting away groceries, it was time for their nightly routine. Each night, they pulled out a treat, and tonight, like nearly every night after eating Chinese and going grocery shopping, it was tiramisu cake. Kevin began scrolling through the many apps on their TV for something to watch, having ended the series they had been watching the night before. For several minutes, he scrolled until something caught his eye: Flaming Katana. It was an old movie he enjoyed as a child, and now the sight of it excited him. "Flaming Katana?" he asked Mary. "I'd rather watch a comedy," she replied. Moving on from the movie, he continued his search for something funny they both would enjoy, and after a few minutes, they were watching a show and eating cake. With each bite of his delicious cake, Kevin did his best to get into the show, but his thoughts kept returning to his childhood movie. Images of katanas appeared in his mind. Soon, he recalled the moment he wanted to be a bladesmith. As a boy sitting watching Flaming Katana for the 6th time, Kevin decided he wanted to learn karate like the characters in the movie. But where they lived, there weren't any classes in any nearby towns. Once it had ended, he had a thought: Aunt Robin. Within walking distance of his childhood home was the local library, where Robin was the librarian. Quickly, he grabbed his jacket and ran out the door and down the street. Minutes later, he burst through a large wooden door of the library, instantly spotting Robin seated behind her desk. "Aunt Robin! Aunt Robin! You have any books on karate?" Kevin asked loudly, heavily panting. Placing her finger to her lips, she stared at him while using her other hand to wave him over. Excited, he quickly approached while repeating himself, only this time at a much lower volume. "Do you have books on karate?" "Let's look. You remember how to look up a book using the Dewey Decimal System?" Robin asked, wanting this to be a teachable moment. "Yeah," Kevin replied. He walked over to the filing drawers full of cards and mumbled just under his breath, "Why can't you just show me where they are?" A few minutes later, his search paid off. Not only did the library have books on how to do karate, but there were also magazines on ninja weapons. Racing through the library, just fast enough not to draw Robin's attention, Kevin gathered up 2 books on karate and 2 magazines. Placing them on the counter to check out, his happiness was lowered as his Aunt Robin spoke. "You know the rules. 1 book and 1 magazine. Those aren't my rules, they're your mother's." Even with the disappointment of only being able to check out 1 of each, Kevin ran home and began thumbing through the karate book. After an hour or so attempting to mimic the illustrations, he turned his attention to the ninja magazine. There, he found himself captivated by the beautiful weapons and the fact that they could be purchased. He ran to his mother, begging her to order him a sword, only to be disappointed that a mother didn't want her 11-year-old son to have a 3-foot razor blade. Undeterred by her response, Kevin began making swords out of tree limbs and scrapboards around their home to use, while following the illustrations of sword-fighting techniques he discovered at the library. After a few months of playing with wooden swords he had carved, the desire for a real sword grew. Constantly, he begged his father to make him a sword at his metal fabrication shop, only to also be denied. Then one night his father replied, "You know I can't make you a sword. Your mother would kill me with it. However, she didn't say anything about a knife." With a chuckle, they were off to his shop. From that day, the passion for creating blades burned in Kevin. Smiling from the memories, Kevin reached down, picked up the remote, and paused the show. He looked to Mary, saying with confidence, "I want to focus on Asian weapons." Looking at him slightly puzzled, she replied, "I'm going to need more." Flaming Katana got me thinking about when I was little and first started making knives and why. I know I have made a few katanas before and European swords, but I want to focus my work on a specific area. Do it. You know I enjoy all your work. If you want to narrow your specialty, then do it. Now hit play. You know I hate it when you stop a show a few minutes from the end." Kevin pressed play and attempted to watch the show himself, but after just a few minutes into the next episode, his mind only wanted to focus on katanas. Reaching over, he quietly picked up his phone and began searching for supplies for his upcoming builds. He ordered everything from silk to steel, then a page appeared that captivated his attention: antique katana guards and handles that no longer had a blade. As if a firestorm ignited in his mind, he began admiring the antique works of art page after page. The thrill of scrolling through them reminded him of the first time he had opened the Ninja magazine. Hours passed as he searched, and Mary enjoyed the show until the time had come for bed. Turning off the TV, Mary looked at him with a smile as he stared intently at his phone. "You ready for bed?" she asked. "I'll be in shortly. Just want to look at a few more things," Kevin said, giving her a kiss as she leaned in to do the same. His attention turned back to his screen, where he spotted an auction site with antique swords and mountings. Excited by his discovery, Kevin began to scroll and click one item after another. Several more hours passed, but each click brought him to a higher level of enthusiasm as he placed bids on several mountings. One item he had happened across kept sticking in his mind: an old, rusted katana blade with no mountings. Being a maker of such things, he normally had no desire to purchase one, especially one in such need of restoration. The bid was already at $525. "What are people thinking? The rust is so thick, you can't even tell what condition the steel is in." Once again, Kevin moved on with his search, scrolling through pages of items. "You coming to bed tonight?" Startled by his wife's voice, he looked at the time: 1:30 a.m. "Wow, guess time got away from me." "Yeah, apparently you weren't paying attention to your finger either. You opened it back up. Come on, let's get it cleaned back up," Mary said in a very disapproving tone. Only now did Kevin notice blood on his phone screen and running down his hand. "Shit. Guess I was more focused on this than I thought." Placing his phone on a nearby table, he did as his wife instructed and followed her into their bedroom's bathroom, where she instructed him to sit. Kevin loved the way she nursed him, and something about her always brought up a deep passion for her touch. Now, something about the way she looked at this time of night really excited him. As Mary tended to his cut, each time their skin met felt like little charges of electricity. He reached down to her bare calf, placing his free hand upon it softly. His hand softly moved up and down in longer passes until he was caressing her upper thigh. "What are you doing? Stop it. I need to make sure these are tight, so you don't open it up again," Mary demanded while slapping his hand away. "Fine." After another minute, Kevin looked to her working with great focus on his cut, taking care of him as she did with all her patients, but he was not any ordinary patient. Noticing she was about done, his hand once again found its way to her thigh, moving rhythmically and barely touching her skin. He felt his body coming to life as his hand traveled up higher, following each curve of her body. He stood, wrapping his other hand around Mary and gently sliding it between her nightgown and skin, pulling her close. As their bodies met, their lips began to wildly battle for control. Heat from her body caused his heart to pump faster and harder until all he could think about was laying her down. Swiftly, he slid her gown high above her head, trapping her arms inside while steadily walking her back against the wall. Holding her gown tight around Mary's wrist above her head, he began his exploration of her naked body with his lips while rubbing their now naked bodies softly together. Sounds of passion reverberated throughout. Just as neither could resist any longer, Mary slipped her hands from her restraints and began her own slow pursuit down his chest, as his melody grew louder with approval. Kevin reached down to her face, gently caressing her cheek and guiding her to his lips as he escorted her to their bed. A few passionate hours later, with Mary fast asleep from their late-night explorations, Kevin's mind turned back to antique mountings. Reaching over to the nightstand for his phone, only to realize he had left it in the living room, he silently made his way out of bed. Stumbling around in the dark, with only dim moonlight coming through windows to light the way, he felt around on the couch for his phone. "Score!" he lightly shouted. Picking the phone up, it turned on instantly and lit up the room. He knew that not only was it late, but that he was exhausted from earlier events. Nevertheless, he could not help but feel the need to look at items on the screen. To his surprise, the only item that showed was the same old rusted katana. "Fine, some reason it keeps popping up." As he mumbled the words, he placed his bid of $560 and made his way back to bed.